Okay. What can I say? Oh, yes. Every time you save the file, it saves a new copy. Okay. So that's a little bit different because when you run the program in your browser, it's not quite the same as having something installed on your computer. Okay. But I encourage you to use Photoshop if you want to do that. Then you can get around that. Otherwise, every time you hit save, okay, save as PSD or save PSD, it doesn't really matter which of these you use. It's going to download a new version of your file. So you can see mine's called new project. And if I save new project again, it's just going to download a fourth copy. Okay. So if you want to know where the last copy was that you saved, it'll always be the latest one in your downloads folder or wherever you saved it. Okay. If I go show in folder here. New project 3, new project 1, 2, there we go. There's all the copies, okay. And if I just sort by date modified, or generally the one with the highest number in the file name, like project 4, 5, or whatever, that's the latest one, okay. Little tip. Okay, so right now it's called new project, which is, I wanted to actually call it something meaningful. So I just double click on that text, okay, and just like I can double click on the text in the layers palette to rename it, same story here. Just double click on it, and then go, I'm going to call this like panda composition, okay, and then go okay. And then it just renamed it there. And then when I go to file save, it's now going to save a PST called pandacomp.pst instead of new project, okay. Amazing. So let's start a new document, okay. I'm bored of working with pandas, so we're going to close this, okay. We're going to just save this for any reason. Just hit the X, and it'll say, hey, you've got some unsaved work, you sure you want to close it? In other words, the last time that you saved, maybe you clicked on something or you changed layer opacity or something like that. It tells you, hey, you made some changes, you might want to save it now because it's going to go forever. Do you really want to close it? Yeah, I do. So I click OK, and then we go, I closed it. And now it's just taking me back to the last open document I had, which was that panda image when I opened it directly. All right. Okay, but I'm going to hit the X on that too. And now we've got nothing going on. All right. So we're not going to work in A3 or A4 or anything, or any print resolutions right now, because it's just going to slow us down. So let's go to new project. And let's choose something like screen. Okay. Let's pretend that we're going to do a presentation for somebody who's going to view it probably by email. All right. Then it's not necessary to email them a huge PDF document with print resolution images because they're never going to print it out. Okay. They're just going to open it as PDF and it'll probably never leave their computer. All right. So with this in mind, because technology, right? Let's do an HD presentation, but let's do full HD. Okay, not regular HD. Let's do full HD over there. So under my new project, I went File, New Project, and I changed the tab here to say Screen. So I've got a couple of basic screen formats there and resolutions. Okay, but there's full HD. It's the one in the middle row on the far right. 1920 by 1920 by 1080 pixels. Okay. We click on that, and you'll see that the DPI changed up here as well. Okay, because we're in the screen category, we don't have to have 300 DPI. We're not going to print this. Okay, it's just for display on digital devices. So I'm going to go create, and oops, I actually did that too soon. If I just go back to new there for a second, you'll see background white. Okay, so you have an option to change it there to transparent if you want no background whatsoever, or you can change it to something else like background. Don't know what that is. Okay. Okay, just in case you're wondering. Anyway, but back to my document. So there it is. I just clicked X on that new thing to close it. So there's my document. Okay, that fits my screen quite nicely actually. I don't have to zoom in. No, part of it is not cropped off. Okay, so I wanted to play with some blending modes and opacity now. So I have a little example in my notes here of a dolphin and some colors. All right, but you go ahead and find an image of something, a color image of anything. Okay, on Google. It's going to be very, very Freudian. Maybe you choose. No, could be young. Make it means nothing. I am going to find a picture. Okay, so I'm not going to bother saving this file to my computer. Okay, I'm unlikely to use the original again. I'm just going to use it in this Photopea document. So I'm just going to right click on the image in Google Images and go to copy image from that menu. Okay, I'm going to go back to Photopea and I can just go up to edit and go paste. Okay, or I can hit Control V and then I'm going to paste my image in there, and there it is over there. Sure, that came in quite small. Anyway, so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to go and make sure my move tool is selected, which is V. And then I'm going to make sure that transform controls is selected at the top there. And then I'm just going to hold in Shift and click this bottom right corner and make this image a little bit bigger like that. Okay, so you can see what's going on here. There we go, and I'm done. So I'm just going to turn that control back off again. Okay, well, I can leave it on there. I'd prefer to have it off because then I see what it would actually look like on the screen, not without these extra controls and stuff around it. So, okay, let's go back to Photopea. Back to image search, and now I want you to find something that has basically, how would I say this? A solid color in it. Okay, so you could just Google the word solid color, but try and find let's try a colored wall. Enter. Yeah, if it has texture, it doesn't matter. I'm looking for something that's kind of mostly color, so I don't want a lot of detail like this image. Okay, I can see a table and a chair and a plant in it. Something that's, yeah, sure, maybe this one. Let me use this one as an example. Okay. Oh, that's a tiny image. Look at that, 395 by 280 pixels. This is really small. Okay. So it's pretty much only good. It's pretty much only good for viewing on a screen. I wouldn't attempt to print this unless you're printing it the size of a stamp. Okay, copy image. It's fine though for this purposes. It will do. So I just copied that, and I'm going to hit Control V to paste it in, and you'll see that it put it in a new layer for me as well. Okay. So as I'm pasting these things, it's creating new layers. I've got that black orchid there on layer 1, and I got the little couch that I pasted on layer 2. Okay, but it's still too small, so I'm just going to go over to it over here. Transform controls, make it a little bit bigger, hold in Shift, there we go, tick. Okay, so there it is over there, and now I'm just clicking and dragging around on the layer to be able to move it like that. Alright, and I have something on this move tool, I have something selected up here called Auto Select. What this means is that if I click on the content of another layer, it will automatically select that layer in the palette on the right hand side there. So if I click on this black orchid now like this, okay, it doesn't change the order of the layer. I'm able to drag this layer around now because when I clicked on it, the selection jumped to it. And there, as soon as I let go, you'll see that the selection was changed on the side here to layer 1. Okay, so if I use this move tool and I take that auto select function off, what it means is that I'll only be able to move the content on the layer of which is selected in this palette over here. So if I move my mouse over to this couch layer, which is not selected, okay, I've got the flower selected there, layer 1, and I move the cursor over to this couch and I try and move it, what happens? Okay, the other layer moves, the layer that is selected moves, layer 1, because it thinks that is the layer that you want to work with because it's the one you selected, right? If I want to move the content now that is on layer 2, okay, I either have to switch to layer 2 in my selection in my layer palette over there, and now I can move that one around, but I can also put the auto select thing on that function on here, and that means that as soon as I click on that content, it will automatically switch it to that layer for me. Right, so if you're trying to move something around and you end up dragging another layer than the one you expected, okay, it's either because you have auto select turned off or you just haven't selected the correct layer that you want to work with on the palette. Okay, but you'll know because you'll drag something or else and something else will move and you'll be like, shit, that right there is the clue that I'm probably working on the wrong layer. Okay, but the point is just to have two different types of images in here, and I want them to overlap a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to leave auto select on. I'm going to move this one over. I'm going to click on this one and move this one a little bit. All right, now I'm going to go back up to my topmost layer, layer 2. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to change the opacity a little bit, and then you can see how this is blending on top of the image underneath. Okay. That's pretty obvious, self-explanatory. Okay, and now we can go to this little drop-down box here that says normal, and we can change the way it blends. Instead of just having a simple like uniform fade from 0 to 100%, we get these other kind of weird ways of blending things. Like it's almost it like discards certain colors, and sometimes it seems to enhance them, and sometimes it takes information and multiplies them on top of one another. Okay, so they have a lot of weird names. And it's only through like experience and practice that you will learn, you'll get an idea of what each one of these layers do, okay? But the name is not very intuitive. But, but generally, and you can scroll to the list and select something else there and just see what happens, okay? And this is only going to make really much of a difference when there's another layer underneath it. If you have something like a white background, well, let me show you what that looks like. If I turn my layer 1 off so that I just have the white background on this couch, and with the couch selected there on layer 2, okay, I go normal and I change it to darken, nothing really changes. Multiply, nothing really changes. Okay, screen, it disappeared completely. That's because you're trying to blend it onto something that has no detail in it really. It's just plain white. It's only when you have a stack of other images that those blending effects really start to make a cool difference. Okay, so I've turned layer 1 back on, and now you can see I've got the blend mode for layer 2 set on screen, and you can see how I still see the shape of it, but parts of the image are seem to be more transparent than others. That's just one of the peculiarities of that screen blending mode. All right, and you can change it to say darken. And now you'll see that the images are still there. If I go to my move tool, which I still have selected, and drag this around, you can kind of see how on the light parts of the image, okay, of this orchid image, I can see my couch pretty well. But on the dark parts of the image, like the petals, it almost completely obscures this layer, even though this layer is on top. Okay, that's one of those weird little peculiarities about blend modes. It's kind of like adding the two layers, the color information from the two layers together in an interesting way. That's just the best way to describe it. It's actually very scientific and mathematical, okay, but you don't need to know that. And then you can go to screen, and you can see that generally there's a couple of dividers in this list. Okay, underneath dissolve there's a bit of a gap, and then it says darken, and then it goes down 5 different options there, and then there's a gap. Generally these groups are just look at the top one. That gives you a clue as to what they do. Okay, so if I click darken, it basically tends to add colors on top of one another, so you end up with a blend that's slightly towards the darker shades of things. And if you go down to lighten, screen, color dodge, these tend to create lighter results when they blend together. Okay, you tend to be adding color information so that they kind of, I don't know, appear brighter. I'm not quite sure how all these work. Overlay, okay, but where this comes in useful is where you have a scan of a sketch or an illustration or something, and you want to put it on top of a render or over a piece of text, something like that, and you want all the white images, parts of the image to kind of disappear, but you want your black outlines to stay there. A blending mode like overlay or multiply is a great way to do that. Okay, but we'll tackle that in Tut 3 like a couple of weeks from now. Okay, so I just want you to play around with those effects, and you can see as I move it over here and move these images around how those different blending modes work. Multiply. If you want to take it back to normal, then we'll just go right up to the top of the list and change it to normal again. And then if you want to see what blending modes do the other way around, like if I were to flip these layers, just take layer 1, drag it above layer 2. There we go. Okay, and then change the blending mode of layer 1. So now, in my case, I have a kind of a fairly dark object over a fairly sort of light, colorful object. Oops, I'm changing the wrong layer here. Layer 1, darken, multiply. Okay, so it's almost like taking photo negatives if you've held them up to the light. Okay, like looking through like a cellophane sweet wrapper, or like tinted sunglasses. Okay, it's kind of the cool effects that you can produce by using these different blending modes. And you can use them in combination with opacity, okay? So I can have something on, say, a multiply blend mode, and you can see the light parts of the image are letting through the layer underneath it, okay? It's pretty cool. And then if I decide I want to change the opacity of that, I can use this old-fashioned opacity slide over here. And I can still have that thing in multiply blend mode, but I can change the opacity to, say, 50% or something like that, okay? So you can further play around with the image that way. So that's a little bit about blend modes and opacity, but we'll use them in more practical examples later on. Okay, the next part of the chapter, and this is basically we've been talking about layers up till now. The next part is called masks. Okay, so I'll show you another example that's in the notes. Whew, it's getting complicated. Okay, so a mask is, well, don't think of a mask as something you know, like Harry Potter mask. So a mask is it's very much like a stencil almost. Like you just take a piece of paper and you just cut a circle in it and put it on top of another darker piece of paper. You only see the dark piece of paper showing through the hole that you cut in the top piece of paper. Okay. So here's an example. Okay. You have an image that is kind of a sunset or landscape, and then you have a mask, which is like that stencil layer that sits on top of it. Okay. Attached to the layer, and it's in the shape of a star. And when you apply that mask to that landscape image, it basically blanks out the image that falls outside the star. Okay, it's almost like cropping it into that shape. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the word crop. Something that's going to come up again and again. Okay, but it's basically the shape of the star is defining the outlines of this content. Okay, that's kind of the best way to describe it. Yeah, it's like a mask. It's like cutting out a stencil and looking through gaps in it. Okay, but it doesn't have to be completely cut out, like on a. Oh shit. So let's make a mask, and then when you actually make one, you'll see what it does. Okay, so. Or here in the notes it says we can think of a layer mask as an extra image attached to the layer. It has the same size as that layer, okay, but it does not have colors. It's black and white only because it doesn't contain color information. It just contains information about which parts of the image you want to hide. Okay, and it's basically like transparency. It's being able to add transparency to a layer, but in a particular shape, okay, rather than just using the transparency slider. Opacity slider. So you can have more than one mask applied to a single layer. You can have a raster mask or a vector mask. Okay, we'll get into that shortly. Because it only uses black and white only, or shades of gray, okay, in between those. The black color means that all those corresponding pixels of the layer are hidden, and the white color means the corresponding pixels of the layer are shown. Okay, so that is how the image shows through the mask. Okay, the mask is a black and white image, essentially, that tells what part of it's to be visible and what part of it not to be visible. So in order to create a mask, and now I'm just going to select this orchid layer. I'm going to change this layer back to normal. Its blending mode back to normal. Okay, and I have layer 1 selected there, the flower, and I'm going to go down here to the little button that is, it's in the middle. Okay, it's in between the folder and the thing that looks like a moon. It says add raster mask. So I just click on that, and you'll see that it has dumped a little thumbnail next to the one of the layer there, and there's a little chain link icon between them. Okay, whenever you see that in a layer list, it means that image has a mask attached to it. Whenever you see the second thumbnail next to it, in line with it there horizontally. Every time you see a thumbnail in this column, that is basically a little preview of the contents of that layer. But if you see a little indented one like that, it means that layer has a mask on it. Okay, and you'll see this little chain link between it. And I'll explain to you now what that does. But we can basically take our brush tool, for example, and you'll see that this layer is selected because it is darker in the list. You'll see it says layer 1 there. If I click on layer 2, it becomes darker. That means that it's selected. I'm going to go back to layer 1 there, and you'll see that there's a dotted outline around this little thumbnail here. Okay, this means that if I were to start using my brush tool or an eraser or doing something like that, it would affect the actual the pixels that make up this image of the flower. Okay, but if I click on the mask part of the image, okay, on that right hand thumbnail, I am now editing the mask. Right, I'm not editing the image anymore. And this mask is a great way to blank out or to crop or to show and hide different parts of an image, but non-destructively. So non-destructively means that the information of the image, the pixels that make up the flower that you see on the screen are all there. They're just temporarily turned off while that mask is applied. That mask is saying, show this part, don't show this part, show this part in a kind of a fade. Okay, and then if you decide that you want to change which parts of the image are blanked out, okay, which part the mask is showing, you just have to change the mask. You don't have to use the brush or the eraser tool and actually remove that pixel information and like permanently lose that image of the flower. Maybe you blank out the wrong petal and you want to change it later. It's too late. If you saved your document and if you erased that part of the flower, it's gone. Okay, but if you think you might want to make a change later, as you very often do, okay, then it's better to instead of permanently erasing those pixels, to use a mask to just blank them out, okay? Because you can always change the mask. You can delete it and start with a fresh one, or you can edit it to your heart's content, and you know that the whole picture of the flower will always be there for you to change later, okay? It's like a plan B. And non-destructive editing, it just gives you a lot more flexibility further down the line. So yeah, okay, when I clicked on the left-hand side, I would have had the content of that layer selected, but now we're editing the mask. So I've selected the mask layer right there. And you'll see that it is plain white. It also shows the thumbnail of the mask, but there is nothing in there. It's a blank one right now. It's plain white, and white means show the image. That's why I'm seeing the whole image here. All right, now I want you to go down here on the bottom of your toolbar. I'm going to move my window over a little bit. There we go. Bottom of your toolbar here, you can see two little color blocks, okay? Mine's gray and white, but if you just click on that color block, you can go to color picker over here and you can choose a new color. Right, and you can use the slider. There's this big section on the front here, okay? What is the word? Highlights, shades, tints, hues, I can't remember, okay. But basically you can drag it along there and you can see that as you move to the left-hand side, the color becomes more desaturated, okay. It's less vibrant and more gray creeps into it. And then at its most saturated point, it would be up here in the top right corner. Right, so you can select different tints like that. And as I click and drag this little thing around there, you can see a little palette, a little example of that color coming out. And then you can move it up and down the color spectrum here on the slider. Okay, I'm just clicking and dragging this little white line up and down through the colors there. I'm in purple, red, green, and then I can move this around. So I can pick quite a particular color like that. Okay, but when we get to composition, which is in a few weeks from now, we'll look again at color theory and using a cohesive palette or something like that. Or at least that's something you should think about. And if you want to use, probably a good rule of thumb is to pick colors from the images that already exist in your layouts so far. Okay, so you could try and match it by eye. If I want the yellow color from inside the petals there, I could try and eyeball it by moving it over to the yellow spectrum here, kind of maybe moving this underneath the image and just kind of comparing it like, yeah, that seems about right. And then I click OK. Okay. And now you'll see that it is still gray over there. Sorry, that's because we are editing the mask. Okay, the mask only understands black or white or grayscale. Okay, so let's just go back to there. There we go. So when I selected the content of the layer again, okay, that left-hand thumbnail, there my color is now selected, the one that I chose. Okay, so I can click back on there and I can select a new color. I can go make it green now, or blue, and I go okay, and now it's blue. Okay, so let me go back to the yellow. Click OK. There we go. So that is my foreground color. And you can set a background color as well, but we'll get more into this when we work with tools. So right now, if I was to, I have my brush tool selected. You can hit B, or you can just go to brush over there. And I've got a huge circle over here So I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I'm just going to right click and change my size down here. Okay, I am still on the content layer of this flower, so I'm just going to add some soft yellow stuff around it like this. And opacity also works with brushes. Okay, so you can see that it's coming out completely solid color wherever I'm clicking. But if I wanted to be a little bit lighter version of the color for some subtle effects, I can change the opacity of the brush. Okay, down to say 38% with this little slider up there at the top. And then when I draw, you'll see, look at that, it's a lot more faded. Okay, and if I keep clicking and building it up and painting over there, it will gradually build up that opacity until it becomes opaque. Okay, but it gives you some fine control over blending soft colors together. If I just lay down a line like that, you can see the colors only starting to come in. And if I change the opacity down to say 9%, yeah, barely comes out at all. But if I keep clicking, I can start to see some color emerging there. Okay, so you can work in really subtle ways like that. Or I can just leave it on 100% and make the solid color come out. Right, so it looks like I'm basically spray painting graffiti on this thing. Okay, anyway, so I've added some random pixel information here. That's not totally necessary. But I wanted to show you what it does now when I start editing the mask instead of the layer content itself. So I'm going to just undo this a little bit, step backwards. I'm just going to keep hitting Control Z to get rid of it. Okay, there we go. Oops, I got rid of my mask. Let me go step forward again. There, layer 1. Okay, so now I'm going to select layer 1, and you'll see that that color that was yellow has now just become a gray color because color information is useless on a mask. It doesn't see color, it just sees black and white and gray. So I'm going to change this to something dark. Okay, I can choose that black color, or if I want to quickly change to the default, which is black in the foreground and white in the background, in the color picker down here, you'll see right there is a tiny little icon of a little black white square. If you just click on that, it automatically changes it to that. Oh, let me switch them around. You can switch the colors foreground and background from there to there. Okay, and when we get into brush tools, I'll show you why there's a background color. But basically, I wanted to have the color black selected here on this top little square. Okay, and then we're going to select the mask part of this layer, so the little dotted outline is around that thumbnail. And now just click and drag your brush tool through this image, and you'll see that as I'm doing it, it seems to be erasing the image. Okay. And if I change my, let's make my brush a bit bigger, like that, and I'm just going to sweep it across the side here, and it's almost like I'm just subtly airbrushing out that part of the image. Okay, except I'm not. I'm actually just putting the color black into this mask, and you'll see as I started painting it in there, the thumbnail was changing. Okay, now if I look at it, I can see the original image. It's very small to see here, but that's the original image of that flower. And then over there on the mask, you can see that brush stroke that I put up there at that diagonal angle, and how I colored in this black area. That's showing up in the thumbnail now. And if I were to say color in the whole bottom part of this image, I'm basically painting black. Okay, but because I'm painting that black color into the mask layer, it's understanding that I want to be creating a mask. I'm not painting black into the image of the orchid. Okay, there it is, and you can see in the thumbnail it's changed. Now you can turn this mask off. Okay, if you decide you don't actually want the image blanked out in that way, I can just hold in Shift and I can click on it, and it puts a red X through it. Okay, and so basically I've just turned that mask off. It's not blanking out any part of the image anymore. And then if you want to turn it back on, you can just hold in Shift and click on it again. Okay, and it turns that back on. Now if I go over here to my move tool or hit V, okay, and I've got auto select selected in this case, but it doesn't matter because I also have layer 1 selected up here, and I just click and move it around, you'll see that it moves with the mask. Okay, have a look when I move it up to this corner, how the thumbnail changes, and if I move it down to this corner, thumbnail changes. Okay, it's basically showing you what's going on here. And wherever I move the image of the orchid, that mask follows. Okay, remember I put a brush stroke through here with the color black that ended up blanking out these petals at this 45-degree angle. Okay, Wherever I move the image, it's still blanking out that part. That is because that image is linked, that mask is linked to this layer. And there's a visual representation of that link. It looks like 3 little chain links between these 2 thumbnails. Okay. If I take that link off, if I click on that link, they become unlinked. It means that wherever you painted, the mask information will stay put. And wherever you move the contents of the layer, that will move independently of that mask. Okay, so, oops, I'm still selecting the mask layer here. Let me just undo that. Select the content part of that layer. And then you'll see that I move it here. There we go. Okay, the mask is staying where I painted in the areas of the mask, okay? But the image behind it is moving. And you can actually see where I laid down those colors in the mask, okay? As I move the image around, you can see I painted in this whole part over there, and then there was that little bit in the top corner there. Right, and if I turn that chain link back on by just clicking the empty space between these 2 little thumbnails, now the mask moves with the layer, okay? So this will come in useful at different junctures in your life. Okay, so there we go. That's a little bit about masks, and you can add a vector mask to this as well. So remember the difference between vector and raster. Raster is composed of pixel information. Vector is made up of Bezier, smooth mathematical curves, okay? Slightly different, well, pretty different image formats. But vector, and I'm actually not going to go into vector mask, okay? One of you want to know about that later, we can come back to it, but it's not that important right now. But I just want you to understand that those are masking layers, okay? And if I hold in shift and click on that mask thumbnail, I can turn it on and off. And that means that I haven't disturbed the image information, the pixels that make up this image of this flower, okay? I can always turn that mask off and I can have all that data back there. I can have the picture complete. I haven't destroyed it the way I would if I actually erased part of the image with the eraser tool, which is over there, okay? And it works like a brush. I could basically go over there and erase that image there. And now it's gone. Now I can turn this back on. I can turn my mask on and off, but it's not going to affect that part of the image because that is permanently gone. I erased it with the eraser tool. Or you could use a selection tool and then delete part of it, like that. Okay, pretty much like AutoCAD. That's a destructive way of blanking out parts of the image. You're actually removing it. A much better way is to just use a mask. Okay, it means I could still have those images, those parts removed, but I could do it in the mask instead. So let me just go over there. And if you want to delete a mask, it's simple. Just make sure it's selected with that little dotted line around it and drag it onto the trash can. Then the mask is gone. Then you can go and create a new mask over there, and I can take my brush tool and I can paint some more in there, and maybe I want to cut a circle out of it, so I can take a selection. We'll do selections now, and then I can go delete like that. Oh, well, actually like that. Okay, and that's part of the mask. So I can go over here, I can take that off and can move my mask around if you want, or I can go on the contents of the layer and I can move this around. But I can also turn it off, and there, I haven't lost any information. Okay, so there's masks, and we did layer styles already, cool. Smart objects, I'm not going to worry about smart objects on the left. Okay, so I want you to find a black and white image now. Okay, so leave this document open. It'll be a good canvas source. You can delete the layers that are in there, or you can turn them off. Okay, up to you. But go back to Google Images and find a black and white image of something, okay? So you can either put the word black and white in the search term, in the query, okay? Or you can use Google's image search options under Tools here, and go to Color, and then select black and white that way, okay? So I want a colored wall in black and white, that's nuts. So what should I search for? Black and white. Let's do New York. New York 1900s. Whoa. Okay. Cool. Imagine living back then, eh? I was only 100 years ago, or 121, I suppose, ish. Crazy. Okay, yeah, I like that image. Okay, so I'm just going to right click and go copy. or I could save it and then load it into Photopea by going open and place from the menu. Okay, but it's quicker for me to do this. So it's now in the clipboard. The computer has remembered it in its memory now that I said copy. So I'm just going to go to image paste and put it in there. There it is. And then I'm going to make sure my move tool selected. I'm going to go to transform controls, turn them on, make this a little bit bigger over there. Okay. And I'm going to drag this towards the center. And there are smart guides in this as well, which are quite nice as well. You'll see that if you go to the view menu, underneath rulers is the option snap. This means that when you're moving images and placing other images around within your canvas, okay, it tends to snap to the edges. It helps you make little neat compositions, okay. And you'll see that you can go choose what you want to snap to. If you want to snap it to a grid or the document bounds, in other words, the edges, etc. Okay, but you'll also notice that as I click and drag this thing around, okay, there, as I get to the center of that canvas space of my blank document, and the vertical and horizontal center, little red lines appear. Okay, it's very difficult to see on the projector, but there's a line vertical, red line vertical, and there's a red line horizontally. That shows me that I'm just snapping exactly just to the center of my document. Okay, so that's a useful guide that pops up there. All right, so I've just got this image of New York back here, and so I want to show you what a couple of adjustment layers. No, actually, let's find a color image as well. Okay, I want a black and white and a color image. So let's do, any image you want. Okay. Woo. Yeah, that's pretty cool. This one. Old school. Okay, copy. Paste. Control V. Remove this. There. Okay, we'll come back to that later. I'm just going to have it pasted in my list there. I'm also going to get a glass of water. Excuse me. Okay, so have you got two different images, the black and white one and a color one in your documents? Okay, we're only going to work with one for now. Let's work with the color one. Okay, so I've turned off every other layer except my background layer, so I still see the white there, and then the image that I found. Okay, so it doesn't matter what we've turned off, just pretend like those layers aren't even there. These adjustment layers that we're going to go through now, they will work the same. They will affect any layer beneath them. Okay, so in order to add an adjustment layer, and you'll see now what adjustments means, just go over here to this little moon icon that is next to that mask thing. Okay, so we've got the trash bin, the new layer icon, the folder, the mask, and then the little moon, which is adjustment layer. Okay, so if you click on there, a whole list comes up: color fill, gradient fill, pattern fill. So these are these are like layers, but they don't contain pixel information. Okay, unless there's a color fill or something like that. But it's not made up of an image that you loaded into the program or something you found on the internet or copied and pasted in. Okay, it's a special layer that you can use to change the appearance of other layers. Okay, or in some cases just add a quick color. So you could create a blank layer and then just fill it with a particular color, or you could add the color fill adjustment layer. Doesn't matter, okay? There's many ways to skin a cat. So, nobody skins cats anymore, is it? It's an old expression.
Do you ever skin cats?
Well, I skin chinchillas now or something. So, okay, let's do something that's like a basic adjustment, okay? If you've ever taken a photo in weird light, or like a cloudy day, you take a photo of an interior, for example. Sometimes it seems a little bit tinted blue or a little bit tinted yellow or something like that. Maybe the camera couldn't quite figure out what kind of ambient lighting there was, and so you ended up with like a weird tint across your image. Okay, So let's say the image was this 70s show. It's quite warm. I understand that was probably, taken with an old school film camera, and so it had these warm tones to the image. Everything looks quite brown and orangey. If I wanted to remove that tinting and make it look a little bit colder, like add some more blues and cooler colors into the image, I could do that by going to, say, this hue saturation adjustment layer, like that. Okay. And what that means is I can now adjust the hue and saturation of the color that is in all the layers beneath it. Okay. So there's not actual content that it is applying this to. It applies it to every layer that's beneath it in the list. So if you end up with a beautiful composition of some sketches and renders and marker, like Copic renderings that you've done, you've got this beautiful layout, but you feel like maybe it's a little bit too cold, or you want to add some kind of effect like increase the brightness overall everything, you don't need to go into each layer and increase the brightness on layer 1, and then go into layer 2 and increase the brightness on layer 2, okay? It's just time consuming and it's a waste because you have adjustment layers. You could just put one layer at the very top of your document stack and it would affect everything beneath it, okay? And you could have changed the color or the tinting or the brightness or the contrast of all the layers in the document together by using just one adjustment layer. Okay, saves you a lot of time. So right now I've chosen one called hue and saturation because I'm going to try and take the warm tint out of this image. So I could do that. Excuse me, that would actually be a slightly different one. But play with the settings in hue anyway, and saturation and lightness to see what it does to the image. Okay, so saturation will increase how vibrant the color looks. Okay, so if I drag this all the way down to negative 100, it's taking all the saturation out of the colors. In other words, it's reducing that image slowly as the percentage goes down to black and white or to grayscale. Okay, and conversely, if I take that slider and move it all the way to the right up to 100%, you can see how as I gradually increase it, the colors become more and more vibrant. But then eventually, there's only so much pixel information in there, and then they'll kind of start to wash out and you'll end up with weird blocky effects like this because you're using this effect at its most extreme. Okay, generally you wouldn't do that. You'd only change it a couple of percent either way. All right, so that's what saturation does. You can affect the vibrancy of a color like that. So if you want something to feel a little bit more old school or vintage, or that's just the look and feel or the emotion that you're trying to carry in the image, okay, then you can play around with these kind of things. All right, there's a lot of, like, humans are very sensitive to images and how they're presented. Okay, they all have this kind of hidden meaning come through in color and saturation, all that kind of stuff. Like we read moods into it, okay, and you can change that by doing these kind of things. And it's basically like the manual version of filters that you have on Instagram, or even like built into your camera app. Okay, so that's saturation. If you go hue over here, hue, you can change it. Okay, you can see that if I leave it right in the middle, that was the original hue of the image, and as I drag it this way, it seems to tint it a particular color. Right, so maybe you found a really nice picture of a leather sample online that you want to include in your presentation, but it's of yellow leather, something like that, okay? And you want it to be teal, but you still want to see that grain come through. You could put an adjustment layer on top of it, and you could change the hue like this, and you could tint the whole thing towards the kind of teal spectrum there. And if I increase the saturation, you'll see it goes like really gnarly, okay? But that's one way that you could change it. Like, let me take it over here to this red color. It's quite close to the original, actually, like there. And then I could adjust the saturation, and I could make it seem very orangey. Okay, and I can change the lightness as well with this thing down here. You can see that it's affecting the overall brightness of this whole image. Okay, so that's just one adjustment layer. And then when I'm done, you don't need to click done or anything like that. You can just basically click somewhere outside of that layer, of that little properties palette that popped up there. Okay, and there it is over there. And every time I click back on that thing, it's going to open the properties palette for me there. I can close it by clicking on properties. Right, and then if you decide you don't like the changes that were in that hue or saturation layer, you can just turn the layer off, and then your image goes back to normal. Okay. And the other thing you can do is if you've got multiple images in here, but you only want to change the hue or saturation halfway down the list, like I want this 70s one to stay the same, but I want the one in the background, this New York one, to change its hue and saturation, I'll just drag this layer in between those. Okay. Now it will only affect the ones beneath it. So it will affect layer 2, 1, that one's also called layer 2. and the background. But layer 3 will not be affected by this hue or saturation layer because it's above it in the list. All right. So I'm just going to delete that now. Okay, I'm done with that layer. It was just an experiment, so I'm just going to drag it onto the trash can and delete it like that. Now I'm going to turn off that colored image and let's have a look at. No, I'm going to leave it on. I'll come back to black and white on later. Let's play around some more with this one. Turn off transform controls there. Okay, so there on layer 3. So now let's do a levels adjustment. This is probably one of the ones you'll use most often, okay? Yeah, something looks a little bit washed out, or maybe you'd like to increase some of the detail in the shadow area. Okay, we refer to that as highlights, midtones, and shadows, darks. So let's add an adjustment layer of a different kind. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of my layers palette here. I'm going to click that little moon icon again, and I'm going to choose, where is it? Levels. Okay, there it is near the top. It's number 5 from the top. Okay, and it opens up the properties palette again here, but it's not showing us those sliders for hue, saturation, and lightness anymore, or HSL, this is abbreviated sometimes. It's giving us this image over here, which is a little graph, and this is what's known as a histogram. Okay, it's basically a graph of the color information that it sees in the document at this point, at whichever point the layer is placed. And you'll see that I've got sliders here, little blocks. One is a black one, one's a gray one, and one's a white one. And if I grab this block and move it, you can see that it is basically, sure, it's hard to explain, but the amount of shades in this image altogether, okay, sitting on the couch, the dark color of the carpet, the lighter color of the wall, etc., the white that's in this lettering, okay, is represented here on a graph. And you can see that I've got a spike here on the graph that's between this black square and between this gray square, which is the midtones of the image, okay? The image, the parts of the image, or the colors of the image that if you were to make them black and white would be kind of not quite black, not quite white, they'd be kind of muddy gray in the middle. That's this area of the graph. And then you'll see towards, it's hard to see it, but there's a little spike here in the white. That is basically picking up those white colors over there. And you'll see that there are no totally black colors in this image either. On the projector, there's a bit more contrast. But on mine, I don't have any pure black parts of that image, which is why there's a missing part of this graph here. Okay, but I can increase the contrast of this image, okay? In other words, the kind of proportion of light areas to black areas in the image. It's very difficult to explain this without lots of practice, okay? But you can do that by manipulating this histogram through these controls over here, by dragging these little blocks around. So if I wanted to, you can see I've got a lot of tones that sit in between the black and the midtones here. I've got a lot of dark tones in this image because there's a spike on that graph. If I want to bring some detail into these areas, I can drag this midtones thing underneath that bump over there, okay? And I'm basically shifting the distribution of these tones in the image. I'm sorry that it sounds all very confusing, but I think the best way is just to try it yourself to see what it's doing. You can see that it's still preserving the white areas of this text, for example, but I'm increasing the amount of, or at least the amount of lightness in these mid-tone shades by dragging this thing around over there, okay? And if I wanted to say, or like increase the very dark areas, okay, I can go to that icon, the little black block that represents the dark areas of the image, okay, the shadows, and I can drag that inwards on this graph towards that little peak that I see there. And you can see that it adds more dark into this image, okay? But it's also pushing up this little slider here, okay? It's like calipers almost. As I move this, it also moves this, because these can't change position. You can't swap the shadows with the midtones, okay? That's not how this works. But it's basically kind of a graphical representation of the contrast in this image. Okay, and so by moving these around, you can play with the contrast. That's probably the best way to describe it. You can play with the shadow parts of the image. By dragging this in, I can increase the darkness there, and I can add more contrast there. But if I'm losing a lot of midtones here, I can drag that inwards there, and I can bring up some of that color. Okay. And then I can also drag the white one in there and I increase the amount of highlights in the image. Okay, so by playing with these three sliders, you can affect those three parts of the image. In fact, Instagram has this already. They call it shadows and highlights. Okay, and if you edit each one of those things, you can basically perform a levels adjustment. That's what this is doing. And then you can change even more by kind of dragging these sliders down here. Okay, but there is also a more simple adjustment layer called contrast. Okay, if you don't want such fine control over it. But there you go, that's a levels adjustment. Okay, and if I just go back and turn properties off here quickly, click there. And I turn off layer 2, which is the 70s picture. I've got nothing showing now except the background. Let me turn on this black and white image there. Okay, it is still being affected by that levels adjustment layer because it's above it in the list. So if I click the little eyeball next to levels to turn that off, you'll see that there was a small change that happened there. Okay, those changes were happening to all the layers underneath it. That's why now that I've turned layer 2 on, I can see the effect of that layer by just toggling it. Look, on, off. Okay, and if I just go back to the properties of it, I change it some more. You can see here, I'm making the black image parts of the image, and it's probably easier to just do it in your own image to see how it affects it. But I can start to see in the shadow areas, like this guy's pants and like between the guy's arse cheeks over there in this dark area. As I move this in there, it's becoming darker and darker, darker, and it's kind of fading those areas to black. And then, you know, I can play around with this and I can kind of boost those midtones. But you can't do it too much because then it starts to make the image look washed out, okay? There's a pleasing amount to which to use these things. After that, it looks like you've photoshopped it too much and it looks a bit amateurish, okay? So if it's not a great quality picture and you feel like you have to do a lot of adjustments to make it look good, consider using another picture, okay? Because you'll see that if you play with these sliders too much and you drag them too far in any one direction, parts of your image turn totally black or white, or they become washed out, or you lose detail, okay? Or things become like blocky or pixelated, okay? So try not to make big adjustments with these things. Garbage in, garbage out, remember. So there you go, there's a little levels adjustment layer. And then let me get rid of that because now we know how that works, okay? And let me add another adjustment layer in here. Let me go to, brightness or contrast, okay? Here's a common one, there you go. One slide of brightness and you can have one slide of contrast. And what you can see, I can make quite low contrast, quite high contrast, okay? And then that's also an adjustment layer, so I can turn this one off and turn this one on, and then the adjustments will apply to this one too. On, off. So let me increase the brightness and then more contrast or less contrast. Okay, so you can play around with these depending on what effect you're trying to achieve. And then the last adjustment layer I'll show you is just a simple color fill. So we can go and select this moon icon again and go to say color fill over there, and then choose a color from the list. Let's make this blue color down there. Click OK. There you go. Now you have a layer that is just filled with this color. So if you want a very quick background and you don't want to actually create a blank layer and fill it with a color, you can just use a color fill adjustment layer. And because it's on the top of the stack, it is obliterating everything with this color. Okay, it's covering everything up. So if I want to make it more of a background element, I just drag it down there towards the background so that it sits under these layers. Okay. And then if you want to change the color again, when it's selected, you can go to its properties over here and you can click that little color box and you can change the color over there. Okay, so there we go, there's some adjustment layers. Rasterizing. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock. Move tool. So we know how to transform. I'm just going through the list here to see what else we can do today. Perspective transform. Selections. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've got an experiment for us. Let's create a new project. Okay. We're going to start with a blank canvas here. We're going to go File, New, and just let's just do regular HD this time. Okay. So I went on the screen, just regular HD, And I can change my name right here. Okay, I don't need to click on new project later on and change it. I can select a name for it here. So let's call this one warp. Call it whatever you want, actually, it doesn't really matter. And then go create. Okay, so I've got an extra tab here. It's called warp.pst now. Now I want you to Google an image of a billboard, okay, or a street sign. Let's do a street sign instead. And I want one that's got perspective to it. Okay, something like this one. Okay, so I can see the street sign and it's got some nice perspective to it. Okay, like a vanishing point there. I can see that it's getting narrower as it goes away into the distance. So find something like that. Okay, there's another one, Main Street, Center Court. Where was I? There it is. Okay. Oh, that's really small, 300 pixels, so I'm going to keep looking. This one, 4, yeah, that'll do. Okay, so I'm going to copy this one and go to there and then paste it in there. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Hold in shift here. Oh, and you can rotate it as well, by the way. I don't know if you saw that, but if you move your cursor towards the corners of these transform controls, okay, if I do it in this corner, I can change the width and height at the same time. If I grab it on the side corner, I can just stretch it out that way. Okay, and it works on any one of these sides. And if you move a little bit further past these corners, you'll see your icon, your cursor changes into a little rotate icon. Okay, as I move around the edge. And then if I click and drag at this point, I can now rotate it around that corner. Okay, and if you hold in shift, you can flip it exactly 90-degree increments. Okay, I think it actually snaps every 15 degrees. You can see it, the numbers changing up there as well. Okay, so you can rotate an image like that. But for now, I just want to make it bigger, like so. Okay. And now I'm going to get another image and I'm going to make it fit in this perspective basically. I'm going to use one of the transform functions in order to squash the image so that it seems like it's in perspective. So let's find something else, another image, something that's quite wide. In fact, this image works for me. It's almost like two squares put one next to one another, like a panoramic image. Okay, so find any image. You can search panorama if you want. Type in the word panorama or any image that is more or less this size. So quite a long, wide image. Doesn't matter what it is. Oops. So I'm just going to right click on there and go copy and then go to photo P and then edit, paste. Whoa, it's quite big. Okay, I'm going to have to make this a bit smaller. Where's my transform? There we go. It's down there. Okay, there we go. So I've got this image and it's on this layer 2. Okay, I've got my move tool and I'm busy moving it around. There we go. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to make it seem like this image is in the same perspective as the street sign. Okay, and I can't do that by just rotating it. Like I can try and line it up with the street sign on that edge there. Oops. Okay, and I can try and rotate it like this, or maybe I try and move it up on the bottom, rotate it like this. Okay, and I can squash it a little bit. Okay, but it doesn't look like it's in perspective. It's not good enough. So this is where the control key comes in. Okay, so you're still using your transform tool. Okay, I've got my move tool selected there with my transform controls on there. And now I'm just holding in the control button and then I'm clicking and holding on a particular corner, and you can see that I can now, the image is not scaling proportionately now. I'm actually just moving the corner of that image, and I can drag that corner into the corner of the sign like this, and then I can move my cursor down to the bottom corner and I'm still holding the control key down, and then I can try and line up that corner a little bit like that. And I can work my way around the image, going to each one of the 4 corners and just clicking and dragging on those points and just dragging them into new locations so that I can try and fit this image onto the sign. Okay, and the perspective is kind of being preserved. You can see that it's warping a little bit like that. And then when you're done, you can click the tick icon. Okay, and then I can take transform controls off. So there, you can make something appear like it's actually in the same perspective as the sign. And that was just by moving the corners around. You can also grab one of the edges and you can shear an image. Okay, it's called shearing. If I go back to this image and just click transform controls and I press control on one of the, instead of the corners but one of the edges, you can see that I can move it up and down like this. Okay, so you can change the image like that if you wanted to. And probably one of the most common applications of this is when you want to put a different texture onto the wall of a building or into a sketch or something like that. So let's quickly find an architectural sketch. So let's just do architecture sketch, and we'll search. Hey, where's my text coming out? Architecture sketch. There we go. That's a simple one. It's got a nice wall in it there. Let's say this is my sketch. I'm going to copy this and paste it into Photopea over there. Okay. Okay, it came in the right size. I got lucky that time, so I'm just going to leave it like that. I'm going to turn off the other layers that are underneath it here, my layer list. And now I'm going to find an image of a texture that I want to put on this wall. So let me say, let's do concrete, for example, or brick. Let me find brick. So I'm going to type in brick, brick texture. Okay, and this should give me a nice flat view of brick. Like that. Okay. No, actually I prefer that one. Geez, that's a huge image. This one. It's also brick. Wow. Okay, that one will do fine. Copy image. Okay, concrete, wood, whatever you want. I'm just using brick. So now I'm going to go edit paste or control V. Paste this thing in there. I'm just going to, I already have the transform thing ticked, so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller now. And I'm going to get it roughly into the position of the wall that I'm going to paste it on. Okay. There we go. It's kind of there. And then I'm going to use that hold-in control now, and I'm just going to drag the points around so that it seems to fit within the lines that make up the sketch. Like that. Okay. And the cool thing about this is I haven't just used a mask to crop the images, to crop the edges of the bricks off. Okay, and I'll show you what difference that would make. But I'm happy with that. I'm just going to click the tick up here. There we go. That's cool. I'm going to hit Control V again because it'll still be in my, there it is there. Okay, so imagine I didn't do that. Imagine I just took this image and I made it a little bit smaller like that. And I put it over that brick wall there. Okay. And then I took my mask tool. I'm just going to change the opacity of this thing so I can see the line underneath. And I'm going to do a quick selection. We're going to do selections right now. Okay, so don't worry about this for now, but I'm going to just draw a selection around that wall like that. And then I'm going to crop that out in the mask. Change the opacity back up again. Okay. So there's a few ways I could have done that, but that would be the difference between just pasting the image of the bricks on the wall and then cropping the parts of the image or erasing them away so that it seemed to fit the wall, but it doesn't look right. Okay, it's just, even though it's in the shape of the wall, it's not at the right perspective or anything. So this jumps out immediately as like, just a bad Photoshop job. Unless this is the look you're actually going for because you're kind of creating some abstract graphic look and feel, then fine, go ahead and do it. But if you want it to look realistic, don't do it that way. Rather use the warp tool like we did over there. And then the bricks and the lines and spacing and the grouting between them all seem to flow in the direction of the perspective, okay? It's a lot more of a realistic effect. But you'll see that it's also covering up some of the lines of the sketch, okay? So we can use blending modes to our advantage here. Right now, I took this brick layer and I put it on top of the sketch, okay? But if I put it underneath the sketch, there it is over there, layer 4, and I move it underneath my sketch layer, which is layer 3. Is it? Layer 3? Yeah. If I turn it on and off, it is indeed the sketch. And I go to my layer 3, okay, which is the sketch. Let me just rename it so that you know, sketch. Okay, and I change the opacity. Look what happens. I can start to see the wall, but it also starts to fade out the image of the text of the sketch, which means it's the wrong way to do a blending here. You shouldn't use opacity. Rather go over to this normal over here and choose a blending mode that is multiply. There we go. And what that does is it basically takes all the dark colors of that image and it sort of, I don't know, like mixes them digitally into that brick texture underneath. So now I have the best of both worlds, okay? I have my brick texture underneath that sketch, but I also can still see the lines of the sketch. If I change the blending mode back to normal, the white part of the sketch completely covers up my brick. Okay, but if I go to darken, it has a similar effect. If I go to multiply, a little bit more contrast there. Okay, but that's quite a nice effect. And now I can take wood and sky and all kinds of stuff, and I can composite. I can basically build up the sketch and add color and texture into it. Okay, and this is a really cool presentation technique that you can use if you don't want to do Copic or marker rendering, or you make a mistake, or you're trying to fix it, or you have a sketch already done that you want to add some quick background color to or something. You don't want to have to rescan it or do it by hand. You can do it in Photoshop. And you can add in a solid color like this as well. Like let's say I did want to just make this part yellow. Okay, I can create a new layer over here, layer 6. I can go to my brush tool. Okay, this is not probably the best way to do this. I'd probably want a nice crisp edge with the selection or something. But just for now, I'm going to quickly change the size down to something smaller like that. Oh, what's coming out is black. Hang on, undo. Let me go over here as my color picker, choose a different color. Let's do yellow. Kind of egg yolk yellow. And my hardness, I'm going to increase because I don't want to see that fuzzy edge. I want to see a nice hard edge, so I'm going to increase my hardness to 100%, maybe take the size down. There we go, that looks good. Okay, so I'm just going to paint in here. Don't worry about covering up the lines too much, just for an example. Okay, that's a really crap job. But there we go, I've got some color over there, but it's still being obliterated. I mean, it's covering up this image here. So this thing is still on multiply mode. Okay, so I can just take that color layer and I can drag it underneath the sketch. There we go. That looks a whole lot better. Okay, so now the sketch lines are still coming through, but it's also picking up the color that I put in. And if you decide you want to change that color later on, okay, you could add an adjustment layer there. You could delete it and repaint it in. You could turn it off completely if you want to just get rid of it, or you could delete it, but then it's gone forever. Okay, but the same way that I used an adjustment layer on there, you could actually just physically change the pixels themselves by going to like filter or image adjustments, hue, saturation, and then I could change the hue of this image like that. I don't need to repaint it. I could just drag the slider around and maybe make it, okay, maybe a purple color, and go okay. Okay, so there you go. So you can save yourself time by having to redo this whole fill by just changing the hue of it, if that's all you want to do. Okay, so that's a pretty good example there of why, of blending modes, and also of using the control key to be able to warp and transform images in a kind of perspective mode like that. Okay, so, and we'll do a tutorial later on that actually involves adding texture to like a flat surface or flat plane like that. Okay, so that was chapters. Transformation, perspective, warping. Oh yeah. Okay, there's one other cool thing you can do. Okay, it's called warp. So I want you now to, let's just create a new document. Why not? Let's do another HD document. Okay, great. Now I want you to go into Google Images and find an image of a blank can. Okay, so blank can. Okay, and product designers and people that use, there's lots of images like this because people are always mocking up brands and stuff onto cans, other standard beverage containers. Okay, so any one of these will do. I'm just going to take this one. No, maybe this one. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go copy, and I'm going to go to Photo P and hit Control V, paste. Okay, I'm going to move it over there into the center, make it a bit bigger. Okay, cool, done. And now I'm going to find a label to put on there. Okay, so maybe someone asked you to do a mock-up of a wine label cable, wine label something, I don't know. Or maybe you're dealing with a round pillar in your design or some kind of curved element on the wall and you want to do a mock-up of what a paint color would look like on there or some other kind of detail. Okay, so let's find, it doesn't matter what image you use here, geez. I'm going to use knickknacks packet. I wonder if I can get a flat maybe just knickknacks. How about that? Oh, come internet. Wow, it's very slow. Are you guys finding internet slow down? No, just me. Oh, there we go. Ah, there we go. It's a nice square image. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to copy this image, and it's got a white background. And actually, maybe we can do that as an example, how to get rid of that white background. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control V. I'll copy that image. And now imagine this was a rectangular label, and I wanted to make this label appear like it was on the can. Okay, if I just use these transform controls and I squash the image a little bit, and I put it like that over the can. Okay, it doesn't look particularly realistic because I'm viewing this can from slightly elevated kind of point of view. Okay, I can see the rim of the cam, and so I know that this image should be warped a little bit. It should appear to follow the contours of the can. Okay, so I could change its blending mode now as well to quickly get rid of that white background. I could change it to darken. There we go. Okay, I didn't even need to remove that white background. It just did it automatically through that blending mode. Okay, that was darken blending mode, so that was quite cool. But it doesn't quite fit the contours of the can. Okay, so let me just change it back to normal for now so I can see the white edges of this content. And I'm going to go to my transform controls up here, and where's my warp? Oh, there we go. So as soon as I hit control and clicked on one of the icons, this little banner popped up here at the top. Okay, so you should be seeing this. And if I go over here to warp, okay, it's a little button, I can click on it, and you'll see that it adds these little points in the image like this. And if I click on each one of these points, I can actually, it's attached to a little line, like a little curve, okay? And you can drag these off like this. And so you can actually warp the image in a kind of a smooth way like this. Is everyone at this point? Am I going too fast? No? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, but because I've got an image of a can, I'm not going to warp it just in any direction. I'm going to just kind of move these handles back to the way they were. And I probably want to be seeing an indentation in the top here. Okay, so I'm going to grab these little curves and move them down there, and then I'm also going to move this down like that. And maybe I'll get rid of that bulge in the corner by just, the image wasn't perfectly rectangular. Okay, something like that. And then I'm just going to click the tick when I'm done. Okay, and then I'm going to go back to my blend modes and change it to darken. And there we go. Now I have a much more convincing label on this can, okay, because it seems to follow the contours of the aluminium there, because it's a cylindrical object. I can't imagine what Knick Knack's beverage would taste like though. Damn.
Like cheesy drink.
Yeah.
Cheesy, what?
Cheesy
So,
drink.
yeah, not so nice. Okay, but I just used that as an example. You could actually warp any image like that. And you'll see that although you're dealing with a nice, neat cylindrical object, if you had something tapered that was like a cone shape, let me see if I can do that. White cone shape. Oh, perfect. Let me paste that in there quickly. Oops. Oopsie. Okay, I could take this cone shape and then move this, turn off my can, move my cone over there, take old knickknacks, and then I can go back to transform controls, and I can hold in control, and I can kind of just add a little bit of fake perspective on here as well. Okay, maybe go back to warp, flare that out a little bit like that. Okay, there we go. So now I can make it appear like it's even tapering towards the top because I've got a cone-shaped object now instead. Okay, so it just takes time playing around with those controls to get it to fit the shape of the thing that you want. Okay, so that's about warping. These are all ways to transform images. Okay, scaling, stretching, warping, rotating. It's all called a transformation. And we did a little bit about smart filters, adjustments, yeah, all that stuff, selections. Okay, so this is the last part of the chapter. It's chapter 5. We're doing 3, 4, and 5 today. Chapter 5 is selections. So it's quite an in-depth chapter, so if we don't get through all of it today, we'll pick it up again next week, because this is also just a really basic part of image editing that you need to know. All right, so let's create I'm just going to kill this image. I'm going to close it. I don't need it, so I'm going to not save it. Let's get rid of this one. Warp. Okay, let's get rid of new project. Gone. Okay, so I just got rid of all those canvases. I'm going to start with an image this time. Okay, so I'm just going to look for. I'm going to find a figure against wall. Okay, figures in a human being. Okay, these are all illustrations. This guy. Yeah, let's take this guy. Okay, that'll work for me. The reason I search figure against wall is because usually there is one foreground object, the figure, and then the wall is usually the background object. It's a good example to learn selections on. Okay, so I'm going to save this image. I said right-click, save as. There, save it on my desktop. It's called a bunch of numbers. Save. Okay. I'm going to go back to Photo P here, and I'm just going to go File, Open. Okay, I could also click on Open from Computer on that little welcome screen there. There it is there. Open. Okay, there, that's the file loaded. It's a picture of this guy lying against the wall. So let's say we want to cut parts of this image out. Okay, we want to select parts of this image. And so if you want to think of like a real world parallel between the digital stuff that we play around with here and the real world, you know, like physical paper and stuff like that, selections is a bit like cutting and pasting. Okay, it's like using scissors and glue and cutting parts of an image away. And it all tends to blend together with masks and other things like that. Masks is like temporary cutting. You can take it away and you can put it back there. But using selections is like cutting and pasting. Okay, but in the digital world, so how best to show this? Okay, there's a few things we can do. The word deep etching, okay, that's a term that you might hear thrown around. That means usually removing one object from the background or isolating an object by creating a selection and putting it onto a new layer or separating it from its background in some way. Okay, that's all the greater meaning behind deep etching. But it also, and we can do that with selections and where to begin? Gosh, with the selections. Okay. So basically, what's the last digital program you learned? AutoCAD. Okay. So AutoCAD had that function where you could click and drag around something, and then objects that fell within that selection window would be selected. Okay, but we're not dealing with objects here. We're dealing with images. So it's a slightly different ballgame. But when it comes to selections, you're basically going to be working with, I would say, probably these two tools mostly. They're the ones just below the Move tool on the toolbar. If you move just down below that, you'll probably hit something called Rectangular Select. M is the shortcut key. If you just hover your mouse cursor over there, it'll pop up a little tooltip that says Rectangular Select. Okay, and then you'll see that there's a tiny little arrow in the bottom right hand corner of that selection button, and if I just click and hold on there, you'll see that I can also select Ellipse Select. Okay, so there's a tool hidden underneath that one. Okay, I can either click and hold on it to select Rectangular Select, or I can click and hold on it and then click again to select Elliptical Select. Okay, and then below that is another tool called Polygonal, I don't know how you say it, okay, but think of the word polygon. Lasso, okay, a lasso is that rope that, you know, cowboys use to throw around the necks of cattle or whatever and to rein them in like a big leash. Okay, and if you click and hold on that one as well, you'll see there's three different options there. I get lasso select, the regular one, polygonal lasso select, and magnetic lasso select. These all help us make selections around different objects. Okay, so let's say, for example, that I want to remove the head off this man. Okay, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit because it's like AutoCAD. If I'm going to be working in detail, I want to get the best view possible. So rather than having to move my mouse like one fraction of a millimeter to the left in order to make a selection, if I just zoom in a little bit, it gives me a lot more fine control. Okay, so I'm using my zoom tool here and I'm just clicking on the image to zoom in. And then I can use my, my panning tool or my hand tool, which is just above the zoom tool, or you can press the spacebar button. Okay, just hold spacebar in and then you get the hand, and then you can click and move it around like that. Okay. So I've basically centered my screen view on this guy's head. Let me use the hand tool. There we go. Okay. So I can visually distinguish him from the background, okay? This photo it's not like he's against a busy background, camouflage or flowers or foliage or some kind of gnarly texture background. Okay, there's a bit of depth of field here, so it's a bit blurry. So I've got a nice crisp edge here that I can use that is defining the edge of this guy's head, okay? Basically all the skin that I can see to where it disappears into the hem of his shirt there. So I could do a very rough selection of this head. Maybe using elliptical select. Okay, so if I just click and hold the second icon from the top on this toolbar here and go down to elliptical select, you'll see that it'll get a crosshairs there. And if I now click and drag somewhere on top of this layer, you can see that it drags an elliptical shape out. Okay, and if I hold in shift, it will constrain the width and the height together so that it's a perfect circle. Okay, this projector is a little bit squashed, so it's coming out looking like an ellipse on the projector, but it is actually a circle on my screen. Okay, and then if I let go, it releases and it creates this little dotted outline over there. That tells me that I have now whatever's on the inside of this outline is now selected. And since I've let go, my cursor has also changed. That at least when I move it inside the selection, okay, inside this circular dotted line, it changes to like this little four-way stop sign. Okay. And now I can click and actually move that ellipse around if I drew it a little bit in the wrong place. Okay. If I go outside of the selection and I click somewhere, it removes that selection. Okay, it forgets about it. It just clears it. So if you did that accidentally, as it can happen, and it only takes a click to do it, you can just hit Control Z to go back to when you still have the selection there. Okay. So I've got the guy's head roughly inside this shape. And then what I could do from here is I could cut the head out, or I could just copy it and add it to a new layer. So I'll show you some basic copy cut functions here with the selection tool. So just remember that nothing's going to happen if you don't have anything selected, or at least it'll think that everything is selected unless you have an actual dotted outline that is telling the program specifically I want the area inside the outline to be selected. So this is a round circle, and I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to go Cut, Control X. There we go. And because I didn't start a new document, there was no default white background layer. Okay, so when I cut this part of the image out, and because I only have one layer in here, there's no layer underneath this anymore. Okay, that's why I'm seeing that transparent grid pattern again. Okay, this is now a transparent part of the image. If I were to save it in a file format that supported that, at least PSD does, of course, and PNG as well. But if I saved this as a JPEG now, it would come out white or black or something else. You wouldn't have that transparency preserved. But because we're still in image editing software, we get to work with stuff like this. Okay, so I just cut out that selection. I cut out that round dot, and it's now in the memory of the computer. I can paste it now. I can go Edit, Paste. And it basically pasted it kind of pretty much where it was, but it put it into a new layer. Okay, you can see a fine outline there of where it didn't quite exactly line up. And if I turn layer 1 off, you can see that it's gone. I basically cut the head out the background layer, and then I pasted it, and it put it into new layer 1. Okay, and there it is. I can turn it on and off, and basically this guy's head is being cut out or not cut out. Okay. If I hit Control Z to undo that, okay, so I want to go back to the point, hitting Control Z, stepping backwards now. I have to undo all of the views I showed. There we go. Back to the selection step, okay? And if you made a mistake and you accidentally clicked away somewhere and you removed that selection, just draw another one, okay? It doesn't really matter for this example. I'm going to move it a little bit over there, okay. Now, instead of going cut, I'm going to go copy, okay? So I'm going to go to Edit, Copy, and now I'm going to go to Edit, Paste. Okay, there we go. So now it's created a new layer with his head in the layer, and if I turn off the background layer, you'll see that there is layer 1 with his head inside that selection that I made. And if I turn on the background, we see them both together, but because they're exactly on top of one another and they contain the same content, you'd never know if I turn layer 1 off. Look, I'm turning it on off. But because I copied it and not cut it, that information is still preserved on the background layer. Okay. So you'll see now, if I take my move tool with layer 1 selected and I move it, there is that circular shape of his head, and I'm now moving it. Okay, it made a copy. So the other one is still there underneath. So there you go, that's an example of copy versus cut. All right, but so far we've just been doing a very crude selection. We've just been doing an elliptical selection, okay, and that's not really giving us a nice outline around this guy's head. It's just giving us this kind of a stupid circle. Okay, so if we want to get a little more detailed, we can start to get into some of these other selection tools. So I'm going to delete layer 1. I don't need that right now. Let's say I want to get really up close to this shape, the outline of this guy's head. So what I can do now is instead of using a dumb object like an ellipse or a rectangle, okay, a rectangle works the same way except it's rectangular too. I'm going to go to the third tool down the list, the one just underneath there, and I'm going to select lasso. Okay, and this is like dead on and like impossible with a mouse. But I want to show you how it works anyway. So you just click and drag as if you were painting a little outline for your selection. Okay, so I'm going to start here on his chin, and I'm going to move my mouse over, and then I'm going to go into the little crease there on his lip, and then I'm just going to move it over. That's not so bad. And then I'm going to move over his nose over there, and it's like, oh fuck, I slipped, and I went through his head down there. Shit. Okay, let me just take it back over there. Okay, and I'm just basically loosely freehanding an outline around there, and then I'm just going to bring the selection back, because I need to create a loop out of it, and then let go somewhere over there where I started. Okay, and then join those 2 points together, the point where I started and where I let go, and it's created a little selection here that is roughly following the contours of his face up until the point where I slipped. Okay, and that's why this is not the perfect tool to use, but sometimes it is, sometimes it has uses. Okay, so now what I can do is I get that 4-way stop sign if I move my cursor inside the selection that I created. And I can move that selection around, but because it's matched exactly to those pixels, that I wanted to stay there, so I'm not going to move it anyway. Okay, but I can now choose to do something. I can cut this part of his face out and paste it again. Let's do that, like cut. There we go. So it removed that part of the selection and put it into the memory of the computer, and now I'm just going edit, paste. There we go. And it pasted it exactly in the same spot, but it's on a new layer this time. Okay, so if I go and move this layer off, I can do that. Right, so let me just go back here for a second. Wait, we go forward, step forward. Where is that selection? Okay, doesn't matter. We'll do another selection. Okay, so that was an example of using a freehand lasso. But it's a little bit tricky to work with because if you slip, it makes a mistake like that, and then you have to click outside the selection and redo it. Okay. So let's try something called polygonal lasso. So if you go on that third tool again where original lasso was and you click and hold it, just go down to the second one on that list, to polygonal lasso. And now instead of holding your finger down on the mouse button and then like moving your hand like a Jedi ninja, okay, you can just click once to place a little straight line. And it's a bit like drawing a polygon shape in AutoCAD. You just click once on the image to start it, and you'll see that I've got a little line that's now attached following that point where I started to my cursor. And then you can click another little point along his chin, and then just keep going little by little, clicking and adding a little line segment by line segment, one at a time. Okay. And it does create a slightly jagged appearance sometimes, and it just means that you could zoom in and place more smaller lines. Okay, you can place more lines, and you can make them smaller to approximate a curve. Okay, I'm not going to do the whole guy's head. I'm just going to do his face, and then halfway through his cranium there, I'm going to just start laying down some lines and working my way back to where I started there, say on the chin. Okay, so I created the selection using this polygonal method now instead of just freehanding it. So it's a little bit more precise, or it's easier to control anyway. And now I'm going to say, I'm going to cut this out, I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to move it slightly away like that. Okay, that's pretty nuts. Looks like a robot, like I'm making this guy's face pop off like Men in Black here. Okay, let's say I want to get rid of that transparency underneath there. I just need to add a background layer, okay. So I can do that by creating a new layer, putting it at the bottom of my list so that it becomes the base layer, okay, the background. And then I can go over here to this gradient tool. Okay. And we're going to go into this in more detail later on, but just go into there right now and click and hold on it, and you get to select paint bucket as an alternate to this tool. Okay, paint bucket. And then we can choose a color that we want to fill this layer 2 background with. Okay, so if I go to my little color picker down there, I'm going to say, I'm actually just going to make it a white background, so I'm going to move my cursor right into the top left of that corner there. Okay. And then I'm just going to use my paint bucket tool and go click. And I can click anywhere and it will fill that color in there. But if it's not coming out, make sure you do have layer 2 selected. If I go to my background and I click the paint bucket tool, oops, it starts to fill in color in the background like that. Okay, that's a mistake. So just make sure you have layer 2 selected, and then you can click in there and fill it. So you'll see before I filled it, it looked like that. There was a transparent image underneath this guy's head where I cut it away. When I turn that layer back on, there's my background layer that I filled in. Okay, so I'm going to turn this guy's head back on, and then we could even add a drop shadow underneath there. If I double click on the thumbnail there, I could go to drop shadow, and I could make it seem like this guy's head is floating off his body. Okay, distance. So I'm just playing around with these basic settings. Okay. Okay, that's quite weird. Yeah. Yes, yeah. If you go to the bathroom, just go to the bathroom. You need to ask. It's fine. Yeah. Oh, maybe we should do it now quickly. Or I can do it next week as well. It's so simple. It's basically creating a mask. No, let's do it. Let's do it because we can always revisit this next week. Okay. List selections is quite a tricky chapter. Okay, but we started to get through it anyway. So there we go. So we did a polygonal lasso selection, and you can see where I placed all the points individually because he's got this slightly jagged outline. Okay. If I just took my time about it, I could have put some more points down there. Clicked a few times more often, and then you would have a smoother contour. Right. But where you have a nice, I'm just going to wait for Inge to get back actually. Do you have any questions so far? Shane, this is a long period for you. 3 hours. At least it's only once a week. And you'll all become Photoshop and ninjas after this and make amazing presentations. Absolutely, you're more than welcome to use Photoshop.
This is not so fun.
Okay, up until now, I mean, Photoshop uses exactly the same tools, almost in the same position on the toolbar, okay? Yeah.
It's the shortcuts in
The shortcuts. I know, like Control T is different. Okay. So if you do have some experience using Photoshop, by all means, go ahead and use it. There will be some differences, okay? So, but you'll be able to do it because they're pretty similar. Brush tools. Yeah. Okay, I think we can do the tutorial now. Okay, here we go. Just keep these because I'm going to save a tree and I'll give these to the group B on Thursday. Okay. So these are worth two marks each. And we do them in class. Okay. And it shouldn't take you very long, and I'll usually leave enough time to finish it in class. And then basically you do 5 of these, and we do 1 brief this term, and then these each come 2%. So attendance and dots are kind of the same thing. Okay. Oh, just enough. Okay, so it's pretty simple. Let's steal yours quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, type 1. So this should take you no more than 10 minutes. Okay, using image A provided. Okay, so I'm not going to provide you with image A right now. It doesn't actually matter what image it is. Because then I'd have to put it on the common folder, you all have to go looking for it. And that's a very schleck, it's on your own computers. Okay, so I want you to just open any image at the moment. Find any Google image that you want.
Are we going to do it now?
Yeah, let's do it now. Okay. we know a little bit about selections and masks, so we know all the basics that you'll need to do this tutorial with. Hey? Any photo you want, yeah. And then we'll take it through a resizing step, but we won't do it exactly to the sizes of what's in the tut there. Okay, it's just a practical exercise. The point is that you do it. It doesn't have to be to the letter of the tut. At least not for this one. Later on, I will give you some exact files that I want you to work with specifically that will test your skills. Where am I? I want. Okay, so I want you to resize the image that you find, whatever it is. Change something about its overall size. Okay, you don't have to make it the exact number of pixels as written on the top page, because you may have one that is a different shape, you know. And then I want you to crop it a little bit as well.
What are you going to do when you told me you did all this?
I'm going to watch you.
Oh, okay.
So I want you to all find an image, open it in Photopea. Doesn't matter if you save it and then open it.
Is this really crap?
There are no wrong answers. Okay, so that's fine. So that image is good. Okay. And then when you have the image in Photopea, I want you to go to edit image size. Okay, and then change something there. I don't know how big yours are. Probably some pixels by some pixels. So change it, okay? But make sure that you keep that chain thing ticked, or that chain button on, so that it changes it proportionally. You don't end up stretching the image. So mine's 1100 pixels wide. I'm going to make it smaller, because making it bigger will actually just lose quality, remember. I can't add that pixel information back in. This is the best resolution it'll ever be. Okay, so I'm going to make it a bit smaller. I'm going to make it 800. There we go. So I took it down proportionally, and I'm going to go OK. Okay, so it's a little bit smaller. And then I want you to crop it. It doesn't matter. Don't crop the whole image so that there's hardly anything left, but I want you to just remove a little piece of the image. Okay, imagine there was something at the top, like I want to get rid of some of this white space. Okay, so I can go to my crop tool, which is on my toolbar there, or you can go to your rectangular selection tool. Okay, and you can draw a selection around the part of the image you want to keep, like that. And basically the part outside the selection, this top piece over there, I could go up to image, crop. And we'll crop it to that rectangular selection. Okay, that's one way to do it. Or you could use the crop tool over there, the letter C, and then I can draw over the image like this, and ignore those parts that are outside of it there and just go tick. Oh, it actually added those images parts in. Okay, so I go here and just snap the crop tool to the edges, leave it a bit off the top, and then go tick and crop it like that as well. Okay, so there's two ways to crop it. And then I want you to create a new layer on top of that. Okay, so you would have had your background layer, which is the image that you found. Then we resized it to something a little bit different. We cropped it a little bit. And now you're going to create a new layer, and you're going to rename it to whatever your name is. Okay. We don't have to say, I would normally say save this image to the common file, and email it to me, but I'm just going to, when we're done with this tutorial, it's going to come around and look at each one of your computer screens instead. It's much easier. Okay. So you need to rename you made a folder, cool. You need to rename your layer, the one that you created a solid fill with. Did I get to that part yet? Create a new layer. Oh, first create a, so it'll be blank for now. Create a new layer and rename it to your own name. Okay. I'll just rename it. I just want to see that you can rename your layer. Okay, cool. Everyone at that step? Inga? Oh, you got a few there. Okay. It's fine. You've got a few new layers. So now I want you to create a folder. Okay. Create a folder and then put that layer that you've named inside the folder. Okay, so you've already done it. Yeah, yours is inside the folder. Good. Okay, yes, is it working for everyone? So you're going to change the name to your name. Cool. Alright, and then you create a folder. Yeah. And then you put that one inside the folder. Yeah. Let's try again.
Which layer did you put inside?
Okay, so yeah, there we go. Okay.
So we just put on any layer.
Yeah, put in the layer that you renamed, the one with your name in it. Okay.
We named a lot.
And now I want you to take the paint bucket tool, okay, which is about halfway down on the toolbar, okay. You might see gradient tool showing. Looks like a little fade. If that's the case, click on that icon and just hold your mouse button in and go to paint bucket tool. Okay, and then go and choose a color. Don't make it white or black or the default one. Just go and choose a new color from the color picker, something that you want to fill in that blank layer with. Okay, I'm gonna use this purple color. Okay. And then when you just you just click on the layer with the layer selected. Why do I have effect on mine? And just go paste. Okay. Oh, it's because I used this document. Okay, so there we go. I'm going to do it as well. Tim, folder, put it inside the folder. Oops. Come on. Huh? Jeez, there. Okay. And now we're going to use a mask and a selection to make a hole in that hole, basically. So we're going to cut out a circular hole in this color so that we can see the image on the layer underneath it, inside that hole. Okay, so we're just going to do that by going to our selection tool underneath the move tool. Okay, second from the top on the toolbar. Go to ellipse select. And then you can kind of place your cursor roughly in the center of this image, okay? And if you click and drag, you'll see that it starts putting an ellipse out in the direction that you drag. But if you hold in the Alt key, okay, and start moving, you'll see that it draws the ellipse from the center of where you clicked instead of from the, from the corner point. And then if I hold down Shift and Alt together, I can get a perfect circle that starts from the center. Okay, so that's a little tip there. Those are called modifier keys whenever you hold in Alt, Control, or Shift, something like that. Okay, if I let go of one of those keys, you can see I let go of the Alt key. Now it's just creating a circle for me. If I let go of the Shift key, I get this elliptical thing. And if I hold in Alt again, it starts from the center. And if I hold in Shift, I get that. Okay. So you can play around with that. When you're ready, just let go so that you have that selection. And then we're not going to delete the selection because we could do that. We could just remove those pixels to see what's underneath. We're going to use a mask instead. So we're going to create a mask from this selection. So while the selection is visible, in other words, you can see this dotted line, just go over here to your layers panel and click the mask icon. There we go. And then what it does is it's given us an inverted mask. Okay, so it understood that we wanted to keep what was in the selection instead of the other way around. Okay, so that's pretty easy to fix. We just make sure that the mask is selected. Okay, so I don't want to see that dotted outline around the color fill section of our layer. I want to see it around the right hand side thumbnail, which is the mask. Okay, there it is over there. And then I'm just going to go to, where is it? Image, adjustments, and then invert. So we can invert the layer like that. I'm just used to hitting Control I. Okay. But there, what you did is you basically inverted the colors. What was black is now white, and what was white is now black. And because we're working on a mask, that has the effect of hiding the reverse. Okay, because remember, black is hiding and white is keeping. So there you go. You should now have a color with a hole in the middle, and you can see your image underneath it. Okay. And I'd say that's the gist of it. Yeah. So I was going to say save it to your computer, but some of you on your own computers, and I don't really need to see all the files, So I'm just going to have a look here. Yeah. You need to put yours inside a folder.
I need to put mine inside.
You need to put your layer inside a folder.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Cool. Not so hard, right?
No.
No. No, yours is not inside the folder.
In a folder now. It's in a folder.
Oh, you deleted the pixels. Okay. So just go back a few steps.
How many?
You've got a few layers there, I don't know. Right back to where your selection was.
Selection.
Yeah, so where you have just drawn the circle and you still saw that dotted outline of the selection. Clear. Oh, you can see it there. Just keep going. Oh, there we go. Okay. So instead of deleting those pixels, you're going to create a mask for the step. Okay. So you're going to just, yeah, so you're just going to hit mask. There you go. Now it's giving us the wrong result. We want the inverted result. So just go up. You still have the mask selected there. Okay. And then just go to image. Adjustment. And then invert. Okay. There we go. Cool. And then just put that inside that folder. Inside the master folder. No, you're gonna this image, this one here, the blue one. Okay, but that's underneath the folder. That's not in the folder. You actually have to drag it on top of the folder. Yeah, if you let go there, you can no, it's a little tricky, isn't it? Yeah, there, yeah. Okay, cool. There you go. But why is it not showing? Because the plant layer is on top of that layer. Okay. So you need to move plant below it. But it's being covered by this white layer. And you turn that layer off and delete it. No, this in the front layer, you see, you've got white that's coming out. There we go. Okay. Nice. You all passed. No, you don't need to save it. It's fine. I saw you all did it. That was all the proof I needed. All right. Yeah, that's it. You have now done TUT 1 and lesson 2. Well done. So we'll look at selections a bit more next week, and then we'll do brush tools. And we'll do a few more TUTs, and then we'll just move on to Canva for the last 2 weeks, just to do some composition stuff. Okay. How complicated did you find today's lesson? So that's complicated.
Like if there's less things you can use in it than Photoshop.
Oh, I was saying it's not complicated, but I've done it.
I wouldn't say it was complicated, it was just a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot.
Like
Yeah.
So not to take it.
Yeah. I'm teaching you quite a bit, so that it's hopefully it's in there somewhere. What you actually use day to day will probably be quite a condensed version of all the tools and features we use. All right, so I won't see you again until next Tuesday. Okay.
Save the trees.
Yes. Can you just give me your TUT page on the way out, please?